Hi, Mr. Manukyan. Thank you for joining Opus 93.
Thanks for having me.
We'll just get to the questions. I know you have a lot of fans and followers that know your music, that know your career, come to your concerts regularly, but to those who don't know Edward Manukyan, can you please briefly tell us about your start in music, your music education, and who is Edward Manukyan? What does he do?
I was born and raised in Soviet Armenia. Was interested in music composition only in my teens. I was about 15, 16 years old. Then I moved here in 2002, college, university. I've been a composer ever since.
I know you went back to Armenia a few years ago, and what were your experiences? What did you do? Did you do anything musical?
It was wonderful. Having lived here for most of my adult life, you could imagine it was surreal. We had concerts, about a dozen of them, with musicians from the United States and from Russia, in collaboration with local musicians. It was a wonderful experience. I would be sure to go back and visit often.
After looking at the impressive list of compositions that you have created, I noticed that unlike many of your peers, you compose for orchestra and wind ensemble. Are those pieces performed, or is it a personal project? The reason I'm asking is because composers today compose for small ensembles to have better performance opportunities.
Yeah, the most frequently performed composition I have is not an orchestral piece. It's the trio for violin, clarinet, and piano. In fact, most of my orchestral works were written when I was just learning how to compose. Always ready to bite off bigger than I could chew. And no, I don't compose music as a personal project. They have to be performed. Otherwise, they're useless.
A lot of your music is inspired by the Armenian folk tradition, the Armenian folk music, and it is evident in your compositional style as well as your titles that you have for your pieces. Have you ever considered not composing the Armenian way, just composing for the sake of composing?
The building blocks of Armenian folk music are a part of my compositional technique. I could, I suppose, discard them and still compose something worth listening. I don't see a reason why I should do that. I think in art and music, certain nationalism is acceptable. In nationalism as a doctrine, as a worldview, is reprehensible and low, in my opinion. But in art and music, it's a way to keep, preserve, to develop those treasures that you can find in certain cultures. And being Armenian, I have Armenian music closest to me, so I could speak more eloquently in that idiom.
This is something very interesting to me, and I ask this to every composer. How do you compose? Is it an inspiration, or do you have a set schedule? I know some composers have a set schedule, like compose in the mornings, the nights. What is your schedule, or do you not have one?
No such thing. I compose obsessively, sometimes as long as 10, 12 hours a day. I don't need a schedule for that. I'd like to sit outside under a tree in my backyard or go to a park. I compose away from the piano, even if I'm writing something for the piano. Let's see. The musical ideas come to me in short figurations. They're not necessarily ready as a final piece, but one block at a time, they fill in the space, and something comes out at the end. I have to say that I compose directly into the score. I don't sketch anything. I don't get the blueprint of the piece I'm working on before I finish it. I go ahead in a horizontal way until I finish, just all the way through until I finish.
I know that you communicate with a lot of well-known intellectuals, musicians, world-famous people. Who is your mentor? Who is your teacher for music?
I hope I don't sound too arrogant if I say that I never recognized anyone's authority as my teacher, simply because I think that you couldn't teach someone music composition. There is something sinister about one human being telling another, I need you to go home and read these chapters, then answer to me on Monday. Excuse me, but I would not be talked to in that way. And I think you could do a better job inspiring my curiosity. So that's what it is. I always resented it. I think, well, if I ever teach at a university, if I'm ever employed as a professor at a university, the word assignment would never come out of my mouth. The students must feel that their learning has bigger value than simply complying with the teacher's commands. I'll give you a personal example if you're interested. I was in graduate school once, and we were instructed to go home and study the works of Rimsky-Korsakov. I went home and studied the works of Dmitri Shostakovich. And on Monday I was not prepared, and I had to rely on what I knew already. Then a few weeks later, we had to study the works of Shostakovich, and I went home and studied the works of Rimsky-Korsakov. So you may go ahead and say you were not diligent, you were a bad student. Sure, go ahead and say that. But there must be a reason why I do that. The very moment you tell someone that they need to do something, you give them an instruction, it's not about Shostakovich anymore. It's about you doing something that you were commanded. And I don't want to have any of that. I'm not interested in commands or instructions. I'm interested in finding out about the music of wonderful composers. Let's think about it this way. Suppose, for example, I myself think that Dmitri Shostakovich was a very poor melodist. His melodies are almost scandalously bad. But what a composer. He's one of the greatest composers who ever lived. And I can't begin to tell you how much I love his music. Now, how could it be that almost every other composer I know is a better melodist than Dmitri Shostakovich? And he was such a profound composer. Now, that's a very interesting thing to know about one particular composer. And let's look into his music and find out how the melodies are so lame and the music is so profound. Now, you go ahead and tell this to students, and you'll be sure they're going on to study Shostakovich. And not just over the weekend, they're going to study all their lives because they know a guy who was a mediocre melodist and a wonderful, profound composer, one of the greatest composers who ever lived. So I think teaching has to be all about curiosity, about finding out about others, about what others have done, and also finding out about the nature and the universe, about how things work, and can't be too narrow-minded in one area.
It's always impressive to see composers who have managed to compose for voice and instruments and have done so very well. And you have mastered these two aspects of music. How have you done so?
Thank you for the kind compliment. I must say that I do enjoy composing for voice and for instruments. I still think that composing for human voice is the ultimate in intensity. The words, the lyrics can strengthen the beauty of the music, and the music can amplify the pathos of the words. So I think the heart of my compositions in the future would be pieces for human voice, and orchestras or piano.
What are your current musical projects, commissions, or events that you're working on?
The 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide is a few years away, and I'm composing a piece for that occasion. It's based on a poem by the Russian poet Valery Brusov. He wrote that in 1915, just when the gruesome events were occurring. And it's heartwarming to see a Russian poet in a time when there was no television, internet, to be able to see and feel the suffering of Armenians and write something like that. When I read it, I felt that it was a moral obligation to put those words into music. So I'm working on that, and I hope to finish soon. It's for a choir and string orchestra. Several versions for piano as well.
Thank you, Mr. Manukyan, for joining us. It was great to have you with Opus 93.
Thank you. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you.
Anytime.